Tēnei te mihi kia koutou. Ngā kaimai o tēnei kaupapa o te rānei, ako tuapapa. Hariko te ngākau ki te tui mui a koutou. O tēnei rā whakahirahira mō mātou o te kaupapa o te rānei. He tauroa mō mātou, mua haume me taku kaimai a David, māua ko Marie, me te kaimai hau a Daryl. I roto i tēnei kaupapa, te kaupapa hau, the new strategy. Tērā mai he mai honore mā tērā mō mātou. He mai tino ua, me mai whakahirahira mō māua. Kai tahara mai māua i tēnei rangi ki te whakawhiti kōrero ki a koutou i tēnei rangi, ki te tiki o whakaro o tēnei kaupapa. I roto i a māua mahi, kai te haere māua ki te tiki tō whakaro i tērā rohe me whakokia ki roto i te tari o te amorangi mātauranga matua. Tēnei te mihi kia koutou. It's good to be here another year. Thank you all for coming back. For David and I, it's been quite a difficult year, having to go out and talk to everyone and collect and gather all your thoughts on the strategy. It's been really important work because there's so much new stuff that's come into the conversation, and having to convince our senior management team and the board of that is a different story. Along with that, working through the difficulty of the changes, some of the requirements that we're having to move towards assessment tool data, statistically significant gain conversations that we're having with subject matter expertise. It's all been quite a challenging year for us, but it's been good. It's really good to sort of signify that work and celebrate it here with you today. So with that, I'm going to hand you over to David, because everyone knows David, including the Minister. I think David's the only one the Minister knows. And David's the only one that can get away with like putting a launch pad up. I was really surprised to see that, but he got away with it. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to David, and Marie's going to come in and talk to us from a ministry perspective, and Daryl, our new kaimai hau, Daryl Hall, is going to come to you and jump in there in the slides and talk about the workplace literacy and the skills highway work, which is really important. But while I'm here, I just want to point out our other new staff members. Stand up, you guys. This is Catherine Dyberg. So she came from the ministry in policy. Now she's gone to the dark side. And this is Brittany and Max. These are our two graduates. David used to be a graduate, and these are our next upcoming whānau that we're mentoring through the process. So thank you for coming, and they're a part of our team also. So.
All right, good morning. This morning we are going to go through some of the work that we've been doing at the TEC, summarise some of the parts of our work which are covered elsewhere in the symposium, such as yesterday, and we're going to summarise a bit of that for those who have just come to the symposium for today. And obviously, as Aroha said, Marie and Daryl will chime in briefly with our presentation. So, just like if you were here last year, we structured our presentation into 4 sections because we thought those are probably the best way to really group the various tasks and pieces of work that we often cover at the TEC. So we're going to pause for questions at the end of each of those 4 sections. So policy, funding, resources and research, and then if we have any further time at the end, then we'll also have time for more questions then as well. So firstly, with policy. So obviously the main, this diagram we put up last year. We thought it was useful as a reminder to clarify, who does what in terms of the tertiary space, in terms of government. So obviously at the top, the minister, the government sets the overall strategy that they want to see for the tertiary sector through the TES, or the Tertiary Education Strategy. Then obviously the two boxes below, Ministry of Education helps determine policy, and then us at the TEC, we carry it out, or we operationalise it. And so Marie's slide that will come in a little bit will talk about funding policy, and then once those policies are confirmed, then it's up to TEC to carry them out. In terms of the tertiary education strategy, so obviously this is the current one that's in place includes literacy and numeracy as one of the main priorities, just like in every previous tertiary strategy as well since the mid 2000s. And I guess what the strategy emphasises again is that the sector needs to continue to offer a diverse and flexible range of programs that reflect learners' different needs and abilities and help support their achievements. So in the document itself, it talks about these things, which reflect a lot of what you're already providing. So short, quick options, longer options for those with more substantial needs, and obviously tertiary providers working more together with the community and with industry, and also government making sure we have the right policy settings to make sure that happens. The next slide I'll hand over to Marie. So Marie can come up very briefly and talk about the work the Ministry of Education is doing in terms of the review of funds. Marie.
Hello, you can hear me. I sort of gate crashed this because we never hear the ministry, so I thought, well, we're going to be here today. And I wanted to be up here and talk on this, see what it was like. So this is who I am. I'm a senior analyst, policy analyst at the Ministry of Education. And as David said, we do the policy that the government wants in regard to education. So in the Ministry of Education, there's early childhood education and there's schooling, and they're falling under Minister Parata. And there's tertiary, which is me, and I fall under Minister Joyce. So that's how we get to work so closely together, because it's, to be honest, it's really us who writes the wonderful policy that the TEC then has to implement. And then when it goes wrong, they get the flack and we just walk away. So, and that's how we're going to keep it. So one of the things that we're doing in line with their refresh is that one of the areas that I'm looking at is literacy and numeracy provision. So that is those three funds, the Intensive Literacy and Numeracy Fund, the Workplace Literacy and Numeracy Fund, and the Adult Literacy and Educator Fund. And what we're doing, it's a fund that's worth around approximately 34 million. So we're just looking at the policy parameters around those three funds, and could we make it any better? So of course we've got a lot of feedback that we've had here yesterday, and I've spoken to quite a few groups, and also I've been using some of the feedback that you've already given to the TEC over their various reviews on especially the Workplace Fund over the last couple of years, and some of the feedback you're giving in to David with his refresh, so I'm getting to read that as well. The reason I've put my name up and my email is I'm going to go over just very quickly some of the issues that have come up. What we're up to now is looking at solutions. And like the Minister said yesterday, it's not a case of central agencies like ours dictating what it is. We do dictate, don't get it wrong, that's why I'm here. But no, we do dictate it, but we have to dictate it on what you tell us. Otherwise, we do literally dictate it on what we think, and what we think isn't always right. So it is really, really important, and I can't overemphasize this, for you to contact us. And I know sometimes, and I know when I've been working in the sector myself, you think, oh, what's the point? You know, no one's going to read what I have or listen. But the point is that we do, and I will. And I'm the one who's doing this, and so the more you write in and the more amazing your solutions are, let's be honest, the better I look. And it's all about me. And I want to look good. And I can't do that without you. So I really need all of you to help me. Really need you to help me. So I just thought I'll just very briefly tell you some of the areas that, the issues that we are looking at getting solutions for, and you'll know them because they came up yesterday as well. building better partnerships and sharing responsibility for upskilling the sector. And that's not about building better partnerships between us, although the central agencies are doing that, but that's between central agencies and providers and industry and employers. We've got a lot of work to do there. Again, how do we do that? Another one is getting information and support on literacy and numeracy provision to employers in particular. That came up quite a lot yesterday, and I know Daryl will probably be talking about the Skills Highway, which is one way of doing it. But I'm sure you've been sitting and thinking, oh, why don't you just do this? Well, let me know. Another one is whether we need to target industries and population groups to make sure the funding goes where the needs are, where the needs are identified. Ensuring flexibility of funds to meet learners and employees' needs. That again came up yesterday, but there's so much diversity out there that it's very hard with all that diversity to fit them into these few funding rules. So how do we change that? And one other one is, in regard to the last one, is how can we better support tutors and trainers to help learners succeed? So it's just really, that's it. It's just really to let face to the name and to get that email. And I know I'm going on about it, and I will keep going on about it. Please write in with any ideas that you have about how we can make these funds better for you. Because ultimately it's, you know, you're working with the learners all the time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marie. Okay, so bear in mind, obviously, that diagram I put up right at the start about the government's tertiary strategy, the ministry doing policy, and the TEC carrying it out. So what guides the work that we'll do in the future? That's partly why we have a draft strategy out for consultation. I'm just going to very quickly go over these two slides because to keep the time, and because most of you have a copy of the strategy already. But essentially this strategy is about how we plan to work with the sector and you to help lift literacy and numeracy skills. What I want to emphasise is that the feedback is open till next week. Me and Aroha will be here, of course, for all of today, so you can come and see us at morning tea and lunchtime, and also for the consultation workshop we will be holding, I believe it's just before lunch today, so you can come to any of those times if you want to talk to us today. But the most important thing is to email the other feedback you and your colleagues might have to the TEC by that time. And we aim to finalise the strategy by September. But certainly we've definitely appreciated everything that we've heard from people so far, especially during February and especially during the workshops that we have held. So essentially the strategy has 4 work streams. Essentially we want to reach people who need help, especially in the workplace. The second work stream is about focusing more on the needs of particular groups of learners, and the 2 new groups we're adding there are those who are new to New Zealand and those with learning disabilities. Thirdly, make sure tutors and trainers are well equipped to help learners, and fourthly, working across the government. One thing we will also note is that this strategy now has targets for to help us measure whether we're being successful or not, and essentially and these slides, of course, will be put up on the National Centre website afterwards, but essentially it's about more qualification and course completions, greater usage of the tool, learners making gain as measured in the tool, and making sure more learners are reached in workplace literacy and numeracy programs, as well as improving industry training. And our board and senior management were very clear on putting targets in to contribute to the success of the tertiary education strategy. So also another piece of work that is covered in another workshop here at the Symposium is Haere Te Puata. So we commissioned work on looking at what has happened in the area of Māori literacy and numeracy since 2001, when there was a report called Te Kāwai Order done. And we're now close to finalising it. It's called a Kaupapa Māori framework. And essentially what is in that framework, we hope to see what we can do to make happen, to complement the other work we're doing in our broader implementation strategy. But there's a workshop, I believe, in the next series, which you can go to learn more about that. Very quickly, other work that we're involved with. So TEC sits on the cross-government groups relating to digital inclusions. That's led by the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. Also with migrants, helping improve the settlement outcomes of migrants, and also refugee resettlement, helping in those areas. So we sit on those groups. We're involved with trying to make solutions to make things better. to sum up that type of work. Any questions so far? Okay, I'll move on to funding. So funding, this you might find this section probably quite interesting. So the first thing I want to let you know about is about assessment tool usage. So we know that obviously usage is a requirement for many of the courses that you're teaching, but is that the case? And so this is the first time that we've presented these figures to an audience like this, and this will become the norm really, because now that we have enough data over enough years, we'll be making more use of that data to see what are the trends, what needs to be done better, and so forth. So these are just figures for you to just inform you and just for you to think about. So last year, the usage rates, combining the courses and student achievement component and youth guarantee. So overall, the usage rates for initial assessments in that middle column, about 70% with reading and 60% of courses of all learners required to take a numeracy assessment and numeracy initial assessment. There was about 62%. And then with progress assessments, overall rates are around the 30% rate. So that's what it is as of last year for those two funds only overall. The picture is a bit better obviously you look over time. So this graph we found really interesting now that we can put this data together. So you can see that obviously usage has continued to grow compared with 2012, especially in usage of initial assessments. But it has kind of stalled a little bit in terms of progress assessments. So that is something that the minister has these figures, and he's interested to know why and what we're going to do to try and change that to ensure that we reach the 100% usage rate. The other thing to note is that usage in youth guarantee courses has always been generally much higher than in student achievement component funded courses. So there are just some figures there about assessment tool usage. The other area where we've had a lot of feedback from some of you in the organisations you're involved with is the new appropriate qualification requirement for foundation level courses. So why have we put it in? Well, the Minister agreed to put this requirement into the rules that govern the funds because we wanted to ensure that embedded literacy numeracy is definitely a consistent part of all foundation level education, and having upskilled teachers is definitely part of that. Given that the assessment tool is here to stay, given there is growing usage of other resources we have like Pathways Aroha, it's important that everyone knows how to use those effectively. I guess a lot of the feedback we've received has been on how the TEC will approach this requirement. So it's true to say that we, in response to some of the feedback, we have changed how we will approach this requirement. So you might remember we had an application-based process for exemptions. We're no longer doing that. Instead, what we have said is actually tertiary providers can determine for themselves how to meet this requirement. Really the main time when this requirement will come into place for us is when we consider in competitive funding decisions what extent has a tertiary provider has an appropriately qualified workforce. And I guess for us at TEC, the next step for us is determining, okay, what type of criteria will we be using to determine the extent of that. And so when we are determining that criteria, we have in mind the feedback that we've received from many of you, but also the need to make sure that this requirement is met and that educators do know how to use the resources and how to embed literacy and numeracy in a New Zealand context. So we're very aware that this is something that has gotten a lot of feedback, and we're trying to be mindful of that while balancing the need to actually put this requirement in place. Probably the last slide in this section is I'll just get Daryl to come up briefly to talk about the Workplace Literacy Fund and Skills Highway.
Thank you. The TEC will be opening up applications for the Workplace Literacy and Numeracy Employer-Led Fund in the fourth quarter of this year. By then, the new Skills Highway provider will have taken over the management and operation of that program. Concurrently, we'll be making sure the TEC fund allocation process is clear and correct, and amongst other things, takes into account new research and feedback about how we do our work better. The challenge from Business New Zealand's Phil O'Reilly yesterday to think on measurable results business care about, and as we heard from Downer, NZ Post and Dominion yesterday, the inspirational stories of personal transformation that also matter to employers and all of us. Lastly, I want to reiterate the Minister's answer yesterday to the very good question that unlike other jurisdictions, the WPL fund will not be reallocated somewhere else. That's not reallocated somewhere else. Thank you.
Okay, and so with that, any questions on that funding section? So we've covered the WPL, the qualification requirement, and assessment tool uses. So any questions? Yes, Connie? Yep. Good.
Please, there you go. Can you please just repeat the part about the exemptions, please?
Okay, essentially, so tertiary providers can determine for themselves how they meet this requirement. In terms of what the TEC will be doing with this requirement, we will definitely be, looking at to what extent does a tertiary provider have a qualified workforce with regards to that requirement, especially in competitive funding decisions. So, for example, the level 1 and 2 competitive process. You might recall that the last level 1 and 2 process, literacy, assessment tool usage and literacy and numeracy performance was one of the main criteria in that. So it's quite possible in the next round, this requirement might be part of that criteria.
And how do you plan to measure that requirement?
Yeah, so we're still determining the criteria that we'll use to apply to that round. So we're trying to balance those things.
So in the SAC 1 and 2 competitive allocation, literacy and numeracy is the highest weighted key determinant for that fund. So if you don't have a specific quality audit result and you don't have a specific assessment tool usage threshold and you don't have a specific staff qualification with a minimum qualification of NCALE VOC, those are the things that we will be looking at from an embedded perspective at the TEC. We based that process, the last process on that in the last 2 rounds. So it's the highest weighted quality determinant for that particular round. That will also inform on-plan allocation in the future. So anything that we will be doing at foundation level will be looking at A, the assessment tool data, B, the number of staff who have NCALE VOC as a minimum qualification. And we don't know and we haven't determined any other qualifications that might align to that. That's the position that we've come to at the moment. Is that clear? Cool.
Are the scholarships continuing?
The scholarships are definitely continuing. We've tried to reallocate this. We're actually going to spend the scholarship money on the youth assessment, but the Minister said no, go and find it from somewhere else. So I think three budgets now the Minister has quite rightly asserted that this is something that I want to ensure that the literacy and numeracy sector is professionalised, and if this is a minimum qualification, this is what we are funding. And so that's a strong message to the TEC. We've certainly been working with NZQA around that qualification and the TROC and the difficulty that we have in working through operationalising the Minister's requirements. He's the one that signs off the fund determination, which tells the TEC what to do. So that fund is still definitely a valid fund. He certainly won't be reallocating it anywhere along with the WPL fund, which is fantastic, because the Canadians and the Scottish and the Brits have done that. The Australians have done that too. So we're healthy in context of those funds. We still do have 2 providers who are only there to allocate those funds, being ALEC, Adult Literacy Educator Consultants, and Vision West in Auckland. So those are the organisations to talk to. We will be working with Marie and her team to move the entirety of that funding pūtea over to NCAL EVOC. This is a minimum requirement. This is what we're looking for. The Minister wants to support that, so that's the focus of that fund. Is that clear?
Okay, and I will have to move on to the last 2 sections, but me and Aroha will stay around after the end, so we're happy to talk to you further with your particular questions. So in terms of moving into the resources that we have, so TEC generally provide, we support a number of resources for the sector. We want to highlight a couple that have been sort of progressed over the past year. So summarising very briefly the launch yesterday of the new tool options. So again, we want to thank all of you who have been involved in the consultation and the development of culturally appropriate and educationally appropriate content, and we want to thank NZCR again for all the work they've done to get these tool options ready to launch and ready to trial later this year. So essentially, of course, as you would have recalled yesterday, Te Ata Hapara, a new reading assessment option for Māori learners, and 2 starting points options, listing vocabulary for ESOL learners and reading for ESOL and foundation level literacy learners. So new options to help you with your diverse learners. The other point we want to note is also that TEC is receiving a lot more requests internationally and also across government from government agencies that are interested in using the assessment tool with their adults. So for example, Ministry of Social Development, MSD, they've been quite interested in seeing, well, can the assessment tool be used to help better inform how case managers work with their clients and refer them to appropriate education? And overseas, those countries are just a small portion of the countries that have asked, what is the assessment tool? Can it be used in their context? So, this is still a unique and valuable tool. Even Australians, they're just catching up to us when it comes to what we already have. Pathways Aroha, so some of you might have seen the stall yesterday with Jill Thomas. So the main thing we want to highlight here is that we have new road code modules as part of Pathways Aroha. And we know that achieving a driver's license is a very attractive hook for many younger learners, especially those aged between 16 and 24. Generally it's been pretty successful so far. It's been out for about a few months, but it's already the 3rd most used pathway on Pathways Aroha. So we definitely encourage you to jump online and use it and have a look yourself, and encourage your learners with that. So that's Pathways Aroha new road code modules. Also on Pathways Aroha, if you register as an educator, and this harks back to the qualification requirement, you can complete the National Certificate in Adult Literacy and Numeracy Education Vocational online through Pathways Aroha. There is a nominal fee for completing all of the modules, the 7 modules there. You can do it without tutorial support, which is about $750, or with tutorial support, and that's about double the fee there. So that's another option that we've developed to help more educators complete this qualification. So you can register as an educator on pathwaysaroha.com. Last but certainly not least is the professional development that the TEC funds. Firstly, through the National Centre, through the various workshops that are coming up around the country, and also services to help organisations improve their literacy and numeracy performance. Secondly, through a program called He Taonga Waka, which is designed for those who work with Māori and Pacifica learners. So those workshops are starting now in Auckland and moving through the country over the next few months. So that's, in the pink box, that's where you can go to find out more about what is coming up. So go to professional learning and then click workshops and advisory. Any questions before I move to the last section? I'm mindful I have about 5 minutes left or something. Any questions so far? Yes.
It's not a question, it's actually an acknowledgement. We're using Pathways Aroha in corrections in our online modules, and we've had great success with that. And since you've included the road code modules, the uptake has gone through the roof with the young guys. They found it on the first day it launched, before we told them it was there. So that's an indicator for a very disaffected group of people how good that is. And I just encourage you to do more fantastic contextualised work. And yes, learning the road code is a huge hook for young, well, even for older learners as well. But just excellent work, and keep putting money into that kind of stuff, because it makes a big difference.
Okay, thank you very much for that comment. Thank you. Okay, so in the last minutes that we have, let me summarise some of the research that we have recently commissioned. So for those who weren't here yesterday, we launched some statistical research about, well, you know, does assessment tool use change educational outcomes? So when it comes to course completions, we believe yes. So Dr. Ganeshanana yesterday talked about finding a statistically significant association between tool use and course completions, about a 30-point difference he found on average. We looked at youth guarantee learners over 4 years, so this is using real data to see if there was a correlation. Probably the main point, one of the main points from the research is that the impact obviously, as we know, is higher when you use it as a diagnostic assessment to inform your teaching, as we all know, rather than just a compliance requirement. And the fact that the positive impact grew between 2010 to 2013 in terms of the cohorts suggests that, you know, as our practice has improved, as we learned more about how to use the assessment tool properly, it's had a higher impact. The TEC has also commissioned some other pieces of research, which I will very briefly summarise. And we commissioned various pieces to help us learn more about how to improve outcomes for learners in particular groups. So not just in literacy and numeracy, but also for Māori learners, Pacifica learners, and younger learners. So these pictures you have here, these are screenshots of summary fact sheets that we plan to publish soon this year, and then we will then publish the full research on our website thereafter. And you know, the research has been helping inform our work generally, but once this is out there on the website and out to you, we hope you'll find things that are valuable in the research to apply to your own practice, to help improve your organisations as well. We are still thinking about how best to apply the research in other different contexts as well, but the main thing is to get this research out there as a first step. So, 3 pieces of research we want to highlight with you. So firstly, we commissioned the National Centre to develop a guide to help tertiary providers measure their performance in benchmarks, but using evidence with their learners in literacy and numeracy, so using evidence to improve their outcomes. And so, you know, the documents that they've created, they're guides that are designed for managers and leaders in tertiary providers and industry training organisations who are responsible for things like organisational performance, program development, and embedding literacy and numeracy. So they're quite comprehensive resources. The second piece of research is we wanted to know, you know, what is the state of embedded literacy and numeracy in the industry training sector. Generally, we have found, you know, things have definitely improved since the last piece of research we did in this, which was about 3 or 4 years ago. But there are still big challenges in building, what the research said, that there were still big challenges in building staff capability in terms of on-job training support and resources for trainees. And then the final piece we wanted to just give you a taste of is we wanted to know, you know, how is Pathways Aroha actually being used right now in the sector? And the research shows that it is highly valued by the educators who are using it as part of their classroom practice. It's being used as a digital learning tool, and also that that assessment tool results are often used to guide where a learner would start in Pathways Aroha. So certainly this gave us a lot of encouragement in terms of, well, where next with Pathways Aroha. So that's why, you know, these new videos have been put out. That's why there's a promotional push underway to get Pathways used more by more educators and hence more learners. So definitely I realise I've been talking a little bit fast. So any last questions on anything we've covered in that last section? No? Okay, well, those are our contact details. So generally, first point of contact is the sector help desk. If it's about the assessment tool, call the help desk there, and if all else fails, you can email me. Thank you.
Just to finish off, I know we're behind, or we're going over time, but there are a couple of things that David did miss that I want you to be aware of, and that is that Pathways Aroha, our intention is to include in the next tranche of work, to include the practical test modules that are asked of learners in the practical test. So that's the next part of the modules that you need to look out for. We are investing in that now. After that, the next development will be the HT questions for the HT licence. So those are the things that are coming with Pathways Aroha. So we are investing heavily in that product. We would like your feedback on the name of the ESOL version of the assessment tool. For the people who draft the papers and the people in the ministry and the minister, we've been using this title, ESOL assessment, but I was corrected yesterday by Jan. Thank you, Jan. It's actually starting points assessment, so please give us your feedback. We do want to support NZCR in the decision making. Sorry that we use all the internal jargon, but the term is starting points assessment, and I like that. We have a starting points assessment already, and this is just a development of that. So we just have to tell the people, like the minister, what it's about. And the last thing is the WPL fund. We aim to spend that fund. It's been an underspent fund for 3 years now, people. Can we just get out there, talk about it, find out about it on the Skills Highway website, talk to employers, become scholars of it, because we must spend that fund. That's what gets us in jeopardy of it being reallocated. So that's one thing. Keep an eye out for those changes on the Skills Highway website. And as Daryl said, we aim to open that up in the fourth quarter. Our intentions after that is to keep it open so that employers and companies, and partnering with people, educators, providers, can then make a submission application to the TEC at any time throughout the academic year. That's our intention, that's the road we're running down, so we hope that helps you to spend the fund. So thank you.